Today, I'm going to talk about how when you show up as a caretaker, you're often trying to solve everyone else's problems. You're trying to regulate or manage the emotions of those around you. And often you put the needs of others ahead of your own. This can lead to resentment, feeling drained, feeling burned out, and ultimately it leads to an imbalance in the relationship because you are taking on more responsibility than the other. As I've mentioned many times on this podcast, and if you are new to Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Kim Gross and I am your host, and I'm so glad that you are here with me today. I have a book called Free to Be: A Pathway to Inner Liberation. And I want to share a couple of excerpts from the book to support this idea of caretaking, how it looked for me, and what I did about it. This started for me when I was a young child. So I write, as a young child, in an attempt to feel loved and to love others, I felt an overwhelming responsibility to take care of the emotional needs of others, especially my mom. I loved my mom so much, and it killed me to see her upset. I would do anything to make her happy. I could always sense when she was upset or unhappy, and I felt that it was my job to change that for her. She seemed happy with me whenever I excelled in school or did exactly what she wanted me to do. And this pattern between us only solidified the people pleaser in me, increasing my desire to take care of my mom as well as be everyone else's caretaker. To be a caretaker carried well into my adulthood. So then I go on to share a story that you can read yourself if you pick up a copy of the book about how I ended up taking care of my 89-year-old uncle. It is perfectly natural for any one of us to be sensitive to what others think, feel, and need. But that's different from fixing, rescuing, or caretaking, which is nothing more than a worn out old codependent pattern. So for me, over time, I gradually learned how to separate the times when I was enmeshed and trying to take care of other people from the times when I allowed them to take responsibility for themselves. I started to shift my perspective after attending many codependent anonymous meetings, which is basically a 12-step program for codependents. I realized that I was acting as a crutch for others when I took care of things that they could be doing themselves. I've learned that it's okay to be concerned and loving toward others, but it isn't my responsibility to take care of their emotional well being. Okay, so that is still a very tricky one for me, particularly with my young adult children. I will still want to step in, and I share this often because it is a well worn pattern that I work on every single day to unhook from because I want to have a healthy relationship with my children. And I can particularly go to that place of wanting to caretake when one of them is in struggle. If they're having a hard time, I will want to give a lot of advice. I will try to manage their emotions. In fact, if, say, for example, my daughter and my husband are having a disagreement and it starts to get escalated or heated, rather than leaving the room and letting them work it out, I feel like I have to manage everyone's emotions and their feelings. Like I'm the referee. She's 22 at this point. So any child over the age of 18 should potentially be learning how to stand up for themselves in these types of situations so that no matter who, whether it's a boyfriend, a boss, a friend, anyone that's on the outside world, if a person is being rude, judgmental, critical, abusive, my daughter or my son know how to stand up for themselves because I have this caretaker pattern and I get in the middle. I'm essentially clipping their wings and not allowing them the opportunity to learn. Now, I have learned since because I know how important it is. And that's why I keep reminding myself every single day when I feel that compulsion, that need that pulls me in to try to caretake. I will pause. I'll recognize that I'm aware of this pattern. And then I'm like, okay, this is not for you to be in the middle of this. This is not your responsibility. The only thing that is my responsibility is to take care of myself, to manage myself. And that's really what's needed because the part of me that wants to act out in this caretaking pattern, this caretaking mask, if you will, is the part of me that is feeling anxious, the part of me that is feeling scared of conflict, even if it's someone else's conflict. There's still this fear. It could be for you that managing people's emotions and what they're thinking, how they're behaving could potentially be a trauma response. For me, it definitely is because as a young child, I share this also in my book. There was quite a bit of dysfunction. My mom didn't know how to manage her own emotions when she had big feelings. She would yell, scream, and rage and withdraw, sometimes storm out of the house. As a little girl, I didn't know if mom was coming back. So it was a fear of being completely abandoned. And so I learned subconsciously the way to protect myself or to deal with this anxiety was to be a peacemaker, to try to just get everybody to calm down and manage everybody's emotions. Even as a young little girl, I wanted to get my whole entire family into therapy at like the age of 9 or 10. So it could potentially be a trauma response. It could just be a pattern that you learned, you inherited it somehow. You might even feel powerful because you're the one who's in charge, taking care of everything. You're uber competent, so you can easily do all the things that other people should be doing for themselves. Or sometimes it's just easier if you do it yourself and not have to make your kids be responsible, make your spouse be more responsible, make the other adult that you're caretaking take responsibility for him or herself. So many times it's just easier if you do it yourself. But again, as I mentioned in the beginning, when we show up in that way, there's an imbalance in the relationship. There's not this level of equanimity. And when there's no equanimity, you don't have two healthy, whole adults coming together. You have an imbalance. You might even have this hierarchy where one is higher up and one is lower. And it's really, really hard to relate, to connect, to have intimacy when there's that type of imbalance in the relationship. So you might say, Kim, okay, what do I do? How do I take this mask off? How do I unhook from this caretaking pattern so that I can have healthier relationships? First of all, the very first thing you have to do is have awareness. You have to recognize and be aware when you are showing up as a caretaker or in the caretaker pattern. And then you can ask yourself, are you doing the things that you're doing out of care and out of love, or are you doing it from a sense of obligation or a sense of wanting to control? So you can ask yourself that question. If it's coming from a true, genuine, authentic place where you're taking care of someone, that's a completely different story. Say, for example, a really good friend of yours isn't feeling well and they have been laid up in the house for a while, and you decide that you want to bring over some food or give some of your time to go over and maybe clean up around the house, do a little bit of laundry for them, just go visit. And you're doing it because in your heart, you care about your friend and you want to be helpful. That's a whole different place than if you did it because you felt obligated. You felt pressure to take care of your friend. You felt that if you didn't, you might be seen or viewed as a bad person. Or let's say, for example, you're on the phone with this friend and she is complaining to you about how awful she feels. She's exhausted. She doesn't have any energy. The dishes are piling up. Clothes are all over the place. She doesn't even have the energy to make herself food. She doesn't have other people in the house who can help out. And the way that this friend of yours could be putting pressure on you, hoping you will offer to help her out, or you may just be interpreting her complaining and venting as if you have to take responsibility. If you do it from that place, that's a caretaking place. So see how there's a difference in the energy from which you do it. You do the same action, but you're coming from a much different type of energy. And if you do end up saying no to the person and you don't caretake, and if you're used to feeling guilty or feeling bad for saying no and for setting a boundary, then you may want to give yourself an extra dose of compassion. It's okay. You are allowed to set a boundary. You're allowed to say no. It is not your job or responsibility to take care of everyone. You don't want to do it. If you're depleted, if your cup is almost empty, your tank is running on fumes, and then you keep wanting to take care of everybody, and you're not taking care of yourself, that's coming from a wounded place. It's important to have compassion for yourself and to just really become super attuned to your body, to your mind, your spirit. And if your tank is full and you've been filling it up, and then you want to take care of someone and it's overflowing from your own cup being full, then have had it. That's an amazing place. That's a kind, loving thing to do. But what we often can get caught in doing, myself included, is spend years, decades of just pouring out all of this energy, taking care of this one, taking care of that one, take care of the house, take care of the groceries, take care of the bills, take care of the kids, take care of dinner, take care of your elderly parents. And the list goes on. And you are utterly exhausted and overwhelmed and drained, and you have nothing left. And you just feel like, "Ugh, what is my life about? This sucks." Of course it does, because you're putting everybody else ahead of yourself. And that's the epitome of a people pleaser as well as a caretaker. If you're feeling really disconnected from yourself because you're in such a habit of caretaking, you might just want to start out small, right? For example, I'm actually going through this myself right now. I have been dealing with some health challenges recently, and I have been trying really hard to slow down and take care of myself. This week, I am challenging myself to have a sweetness week. What does that mean? It means that I'm trying to practice having so much compassion for myself and just trying to come up with ways in which I can be more sweet with myself and kind and loving. And I can tell you, like, I am being 100% honest. It is hard. It is so hard because I have put pressure on myself for so many years to just be productive, overachieve, producing, performing, caretaking, rescuing, fixing. I have been super busy being a people pleaser and a perfectionist, exhausted from it. And when you have those two patterns and they're really, really ingrained in you for decades, it's very hard. It's foreign. It's like learning a new language to take care of oneself, to be sweet with oneself. And I'm having to practice it every day and cultivate it and get used to showing up for myself in that way. I'm curious if any of you struggle with this. Does it feel really awkward and weird to be sweet and tender with yourself, to be so loving and nurturing? Like, I'm trying to imagine when my kids were young and little and they were sick with a cold or a flu. I would just tend to them, sit by their side and nurture them. And yet I can't do that for myself. I struggle to. I'm practicing. If you're really good at it, I would love to hear your thoughts about it and what you do, what your practice is. If you're struggling like I am and you're watching this on YouTube, I would love for you to comment, leave me a comment, and I definitely will respond to it. And I would just love to hear from you anyway. This is what I'm trying to do, right? Learning how to be more compassionate with myself. At the end of the day, we want to have really healthy relationships. There are so many end goals that we want in life, but for this segment that I've been doing, this series for this like first quarter of 2025, where a majority of the episodes, so far, all the episodes have been around having more meaningful relationships. It's such an important part of our lives because we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live alone. We live in relationship with others, whether you're married or not, have a partner or not. Even if you don't have kids, you probably have parents. Maybe if they're not alive still, you have siblings, you could have coworkers. There's always people that we are relating with. I'm here to help you recognize and become aware of your patterns that are keeping you from having the relationships that you want, from feeling connected to other people, because we're all wired for that connection. We are all wired for it. Even animals are wired for that's why they travel in herds. When one gets lost from the herd, many times it doesn't end well for them. We're not meant to be alone and isolated. And that's what this segment is all about. Ultimately, the paradise is how do we unhook from our patterns so that we can have more meaningful relationships, feel more connected to others, and ultimately cultivate intimacy, emotional intimacy. If you are in a relationship with a partner, physical and sexual intimacy as well, but for the most part, having emotional intimacy. We want to be in a relationship where we can give freely and also learn how to receive and not feel like this burden of trying to fix and manage everyone. When you can come from that place of freedom, it is so liberating. Is it a one and done? No. Is it a practice that you have to cultivate? Absolutely. Like I said, I still work on it all the time, but where I am today compared to where I was and the stories that I wrote about in my book are light years apart. The transformation that takes place is deep transformation, long lasting transformation, where you can start to feel empowered and free and alive and connected and feel that sense of love. That's my hope for you. So, if you enjoyed this episode, if you found any bits of this, the tips in here, my story that I shared with you, the stories, if you found them valuable, then, and you're on YouTube, I would love for you to just subscribe or leave a comment. And if you're listening on your favorite platform, you could leave a star review. That would be super helpful. I love being able to see the reviews that people leave. And if you know of anyone that can benefit from this episode, then by all means, share with them. I am so grateful that you are here listening. I really appreciate that you come on and listen to this podcast. And I hope that you love the content as much as I enjoy creating the content for you. I will see you in the next episode.